much. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Good morning, America. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host for the second part of our show today. I want to talk about something that is should be blatantly and plainly obvious, but I think it helps to have an understanding and a reference point to address it. We've all heard about drone strikes against insurgents in wherever, Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, not Pakistan, as the martini and high heel avant-garde crowd would like to reference it. The President of the United States of America has a weekly meeting. This meeting is part of the, it's become known in global circles as Terror Tuesday. And it's held because this is the day that the administration meets in the White House Situation Room and decides who's going to live or die by a drone strike. Now, we have to understand that when the Obama administration took control of this government, you notice the phrasing I'm using, right? I want you to be a between-the-lines reader. He's usurped authority and power. He and his entire administration and the ilk that have followed him in like a flood of demons after Satan himself. And since they took over this nation, they have shut down the CIA's rendition program. Now, rendition was where they would go out and they would find an insurgent who they didn't like or they wanted to nab, and they would go out and they would grab him and snatch him off the street. They'd go in and they'd fly in with choppers, grab him out of his home, and bring him to a foreign country where he could be tortured for information or beaten or imprisoned or whatever. Well, the liberal crowd screamed bloody murder about that. That's not fair. You can't waterboard. You can't beat him with a rubber hose. You can't starve him. You can't play loud rock and roll music in his ears. You can't force him to listen to Ted Nugent until he screams uncle in Arabic and then starts spilling the beans. So instead, the Obama administration has begun the alternative to that, which is drone strikes. The murder of suspected, alleged insurgents. And these people who are nominated for destruction are discussed on Terror Tuesday. Now, once word of this particular type of meeting and this particular policy got out, the press began to call this the president's kill lists. And they don't like that term. So they now call it you're going to love this, the Disposition Matrix. The Disposition Matrix. In other words, this is the matrix of those who are to be disposed of. Why am I talking about this? I mean, it's only happening over there in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and it's only happening over there in Iraq, right? Maybe some jungle in South America where every once in a while, we find out there's some guy out there making a drug compound in the jungle. Well, that's true. But you have to understand what goes into developing the disposition matrix. And the reason I'm taking a long time to get here is because I want you to understand that the disposition matrix is made up of a database that contains, biographies on that person, anecdotal evidence, information from rats and squealers. Most of it is unverified. Most of it is hearsay. Most of it is anecdotal. In other words, there's really very, very little absolute proof that this person is who they believe he is. Here's my problem. When America is building the same type of dossiers on American citizens by the same agency that supplies all this information, that being the NSA, how much longer will it be before we have a domestic disposition matrix? I would wager my name is already on it, as are probably literally millions of others. You see, where we're headed in this nation is proven to us by the complete and unrestrained abuse of the law. We are no longer a nation under the rule of law. We are a nation under the rule of man, and the complete and unmitigated lawlessness is plainly evident for anyone who wants to be intellectually honest to see. And it won't be long before these massive dossiers that are being developed and built on every American by the NSA, by the CIA, by the DHS, by the FBI, by the IRS. You see, they're building all of this information, developing dossiers on Americans because they need to know who is the problem. Who's the sticky wicket? Who's the guy? Who's the girl? What's the group that's acting as a thorn in our side? And now that they have the wherewithal and the ability to utilize their words, propaganda, on the United States population, it won't be long before these two things will be tied together as inextricably as shoelaces. First comes the dossier. You've got to know who are the subversives. Now, how a patriotic American who wants to hand out constitutions or talks on the radio or exposes them becomes a terrorist is just not a rational line of thinking I can follow. But that's because I believe in the rule of law. That's because I believe that the true intent of this nation was that government was a servant of the people, not the people being subjects of the government. And so my thinking process is completely and diametrically opposed to theirs. But you see, they have not sipped ounces of their own alcoholic Kool-Aid of power. They have been drinking from the fire hose of unmitigated and unstopped power. They are operating in a complete and utter foreign zone to us. And at this point, they don't even have outside observers to say, Mr. President, are you sure that this is a good idea? Would it make a difference if they did? I don't think so. Probably not. I mean, this man is a usurper. He's a fraud. He's a fake. He's a Manchurian candidate. And now a Manchurian president. His goal is to evince the absolute and utter destruction of the rule of law in the United States, to break down the barriers of the rule of law, to destroy the societal fabric, to pit us against one another, to foment insurrection, to foment hatred, And he's doing a very, very good job. See, most of you who are listening to me today think that this president has been an utter failure. And I beg to correct you. In his eyes, and the eyes of his handlers, and in the eyes of his supporters, he's been extraordinarily successful. He's accomplished that which presidents for the last 100 years have effectively been attempting to accomplish. But never before have we had a president who was held back by his own, the way he was raised as a child. You see, even presidents which we believe to be tyrannical or treasonous in their behavior still had that small voice inside that said, I know what it means to be an American. I know what it means to live and to believe in freedom and liberty. I know what that Constitution means. I was raised understanding it. But this man has had none of that. He wasn't raised here. His parents demonized the Constitution and the rule of law and society. The people that surrounded him during his upbringing were anti-American. They were Marxists, socialists, communists. To make matters worse, he wasn't raised on U.S. soil. So what we have is a foreigner who has fraudulently provided the United States of America with the concept, and I have to tell you, it's thinly veiled, that he's an American citizen. Who and what was behind the fraudulent birth certificate, which has been proven now, except that Congress has been so compromised they won't open an investigation into it? Who was behind that? That and his draft card, by the way. Selective service. It's not called draft anymore. That's too politically incorrect. Let's call it selective service. We can select you for service. But his selective service card was clearly fraudulent, blatantly and obviously and easily proven. His birth certificate is the same scenario. Whoever was behind this has pumped massive amounts of money and political power behind the blocking of the unveiling of that. But we also know from his own history and his own admission in his own books that he surrounded himself during his entire formative years, including his college and educational years, when he was doing it independently, not at parental direction, with Marxists, communists, socialists, and others who fomented hatred for the United States of America and the principles of a republic. So why would we expect something different from this man? And now he's got access to a database of dossiers on every single American. He knows what you eat. He knows who you communicate with. He knows who your friends are. He knows when you communicate, where you travel, how you got there. He knows the secrets of your past. He knows what groups you belong to. He has the opportunity to put you on the domestic disposition matrix. We have reached a point where it is undeniable that this administration is operating in complete and total lawlessness. And anyone who denies that is either a part of it, compromised by it, or intellectually dishonest. Intellectual dishonesty can also incorporate those who refuse to learn for fear of knowing and learning the truth. The low information people that you see out there who continue on in their happy little oblivion do that because not because they're not capable of learning, not because they're not capable of seeing, but because they put on blinders every morning. They walk away from a conversation that challenges the assumptions which they've fooled themselves with. In many, it's just the idea that I don't even want to know, which is the asinine concept in an adult of a child who, knowing that there's a strange monster in their room, pulls the covers up over their head instead of screaming or taking protective defensive action. In some, it's willful because they have a desire to not see the truth because it means that they would then have to do something about it. And that means they would have to change everything about their life. And they're unwilling to do that for selfish reasons or fear. In some, it means that they are intellectually dishonest to the point where they have advocated exactly what's happening, and then coming to realize the folly of their thought process, now that the reality is arriving, they're unwilling to admit that they have been wrong. And they are perhaps the most dangerous. They're the most dangerous because they know what's wrong, and they're too prideful to admit that they've participated, supported, and expanded it. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're religious, that is the perfect example of the unforgivable sin. To betray your friends and neighbors, to betray your nation, to betray your society, and to betray mankind, to betray your own species. Wow. Those folks are going to have some special answers to deliver. Those folks are going to have to be very creative in front of their maker. What's happening today is clearly and plainly evident for everyone to see. You don't need to be a political analyst. You don't need to be a political science major. You don't need special training. You have to be open to truth, willing to see it, willing to learn more, and then willing to do something about it. That's why we use the phrase educate, inform, motivate, and activate. You have to be educated first yourself, and educatable. That means tossing away the principle that you could be wrong and refusing to look at that. I know that's hard for many people. I know that's extraordinarily difficult. Most people, given the empirical proof that they are wrong, will go about spending the remainder of their lives trying to support an erroneous conclusion that they've drawn rather than face the fact that they were wrong and admit it. Publicly, or even more importantly, privately. They're unwilling to dash their own self-image, their own self-view. And I got to tell you, to a human being, as an individual standalone entity, that is self-treason. See, treason isn't only about your actions externally towards others. It also applies to you internally. You can commit an act of treason against yourself. Willful, knowing, with the implicit understanding that I'm refusing to see the truth because I don't want to face the consequences of what that truth means to me, is self-treason. This president, this administration, this Pentagon, this NSA, this CIA, FBI, IRS, they're committing treason externally against the species, not just a nation. They're guilty of crimes against humanity. Because what they're attempting to do is to destroy the fabric and the last holdout of the principles and concepts of liberty, freedom, rule of law, self-determination, free will. Their goal is to utterly destroy that. And they don't care what the price. They're willing to pay it, now and forever. They've sold themselves out for the whatever gain is in it for them. A seat at the table, the power of pull, influence, money, sex, drugs. I don't know. It's different for every individual, but every Judas has his price. And those people are inherently intellectually dishonest. They're intellectually dishonest because they know the truth and refuse to accept it internally. Where we are today, we're so far gone as a nation, I don't believe recovery is possible. And apparently neither does this president. Because the disposition matrix that he's building right now for us, domestically, this disposition matrix will be used. That's a prediction. In fact, I'm going to go one step beyond prediction. I'm going to tell you that you can bank on it. At some point, somewhere, sometime in the immediate future. When I say immediate, I don't know whether that's months or years, but in the overall time of things, that's immediate. We will begin to see the disposition matrix used here domestically. And people will begin to disappear. tyranny has arrived. And the end is now just a question of time. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. You may find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. And you can catch this and every other show that we do at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. We'll see you tomorrow.
The Battery Station in West Plains is your headquarters for getting and being prepared. Natural disasters, civil